Go Cats. Hope I didn't lose too many viewers there. Anyway, today I want to look at a parable Jesus told in Matthew chapter 3 about a sower who scattered seed in a variety of places. Many of you will be familiar with this parable. As we move through the story, I want you, and I will be doing this as well, to be prayerfully and honestly looking at yourself and asking God to help you recognize how you might be reflecting some of these soils in your life today. You see, God is constantly sowing seeds of truth on our hearts. He's constantly trying to plant truth in us that will bear fruit in our lives and sanctify us. Jesus talks about this in John chapter 17. The question is, what is the condition of the soil of your heart to receive these truths and bear fruit and apply them? And if you're like me, depending on the situation, depending on your attitude, and depending on how focused you are on Christ, you move between all of them in the course of a day. So Jesus tells us about the first soil being the soil of a path. He says that the seeds fall in the path, and immediately birds come and snatch the seeds away. And Jesus will explain the soil this way. He says, when anyone hears the word of the kingdom and does not understand it, the evil one comes and snatches away what has been sown in his heart. This is what was sown along the path. End quote. So many times I come across a truth that I don't understand, usually in Scripture, but sometimes in my own failures. I mess up and I fail to understand the lesson that I need to learn from it. Instead, I just leave it alone, and eventually it's gone, like a bird just snatches it right off my hard heart. Listen, when you don't understand Jesus, dig deeper. The next soil Jesus describes is a rocky ground, where the seeds fall and they grow up quickly because of the shallow soil, but with equal speed, they're scorched by the sun. Jesus explains this soil this way. He says, as for what was sown on rocky ground, this is the one who hears the word and immediately receives it with joy, yet he has no root in himself, but endures for a while, and when tribulation and persecution arises on account of the word, immediately falls away. End quote. I'm more guilty of this than I care to admit. I hear a truth from God. I'm excited to apply it, but as soon as it gets hard, or harder than I expected it would be, on a number of occasions, I bail. For example, one of the many ways I've fallen into this trap is I've many times felt convicted about taking care of my body, been convicted of the truth that gluttony is a sin, and so I get on the bandwagon. I start exercising and eating well. But then when things get harder than I want them to be, maybe on day 6, for example, I bail. Listen. When obedience begins to cost you, that's when real growth begins to happen. So don't give up. Jesus then describes the soil where thorns choke the plant to death after it grows. He explains the soil this way. As for what was sown among thorns, this is the one who hears the word, but the cares of the world and the deceitfulness of riches choke the word. It proves unfruitful. I did this just the other day. I called my dad in search of an illustration for my upcoming sermon. He suggested, after listening to what I was looking for, the biblical story of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. I replied, that would work well, but I was hoping for, and this is what I said, a real-world story. Dad quickly and jokingly replied, you don't think that that's a real story? And I was caught. Of course, I believed it was a true story. But what I meant was, I'm already using a biblical story. The sermon is based on a biblical story, and I'm looking for something extra biblical to illustrate it. But in my language, I was falling into this awful deceit that many of us fall into, a notion that the Bible and the church are not the real world, so they can't be relevant. Oh, how the adversary longs to keep us from seeing how not only is God's truth relevant, it is the only answer. So we treat Christianity often like a hobby until the real world gets in the way. The real world matters more to us anyway, or what we think is the real world. and we're in for a rude awakening. Listen, without Christ, you accomplish nothing. The final soil is the good soil, and it produces fruit. Jesus explains it this way. As for what was sown on good soil, this is the one who hears the word and understands it. He indeed bears fruit and yields. In one case, 100-fold, in another 60, and in another 30. In simple terms, this means learn and obey. Study and ask questions and read so you understand, and then obey it. Apply it to your life. This should be the most repetitive process in every sincere Christian's life. Learn and obey. Learn and obey. During this time, indeed every day, ask yourself, what is the condition of the soil of my heart today? What truths is God trying to use to grow and change me today? We'll see you tomorrow.